Hi everybody, how are you? So, story, architecture, technology, experience. I would put to you that SATE means something slightly different. Somebody always tries everything. Be it positive or negative, they're going to give you input about your project and what they want to see and how they want to change it, what they want to do with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about what people do and the different groups that are going to affect your project. So walking the creative tightrope. Finding the right balance. Animation is great, isn't it? So, there's an idea that pops up, and now suddenly you've got a project. And you're going to start building that project with a why, and the how, and the what. Now here I just want to take a quick commercial pause to tell you about a book, if you haven't read it, by Simon Sinek called Start With Why, and it's a really, really interesting book. I would highly recommend you reading it. In the book, Simon talks about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And it's a really interesting concept, because a lot of people talk about, well, what are we going to do, before they talk about why you're going to do what you're going to do. So in the book, he talks about why is the belief, how is the action you take to realize the belief, and what is the third part that comes along, and that's the results of the actions that you take. So that's a subject for another discussion, hopefully one that you can go and see Simon do versus me, or I would suggest checking out his talk online, his TED Talk. It's very, very interesting. So, you have your project and you're going to start building it. Now you need to put together a project team. So the great thing about our industry is that we employ so many different disciplines, and that's really what's so exciting about what we do. We can bring people from all different walks of life together to create something very special. Groups and people you might not normally think about that would work together, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, to build a project. So you get your project team out there, get your different disciplines together, and now you've got your team. So everything's going to be great, everybody's going to be working together, and you have your team dynamics. Now that team dynamic is going to change as you're building things. So you're going to have that balance bar that Michael Blau talked about a few minutes ago. You're going to have people come and go from a project, and you're going to have different attitudes, different opinions, and egos. Oh my gosh, egos. They always get in the way. And if people would just realize that I'm right all the time, we could eliminate all that problem. So you start working with your why and your how and your what, and things are going well, moving along, then suddenly, there's reviews. So now you have people that want to make changes, additions, and deletions. So now the what and the how and the why start moving around, and not sure how it's going to turn out because there's different questions that are going to arise. But eventually, you'll come up with something, wow, creative. And you come together and everything seems to be balanced, and the team is happy. So now you have all these different things that you have to do. You have to start doing the layouts and the scripts and the storyboards, and everybody's really excited and things are going creative, and all of a sudden, boom. At the other end of that cavern, somebody plants a flag. It's called opening day. Now all of a sudden you got to get real, because now you have a schedule, now you have a budget. Aww. Because now you got to stop playing, you got to start working. So every time you take a step on that wire that Michael talked about, the tensile strength of that budget line gets a little weaker. And if you take a step backwards, you're going to have to make up that space somehow, because the schedule's going to drive you and move forward. You're going to have to spend more money to get there eventually. So make sure you're doing it right the first time. So let's say that everything comes together at the beginning, and you've got your creative idea, things are balanced, you've got your schedule, and you've got your budget, and the pillars are all set, and you think you're going to move forward. Whoa. Safety says, what about that overhead? Oh, tech services says, how am I going to keep that thing running? Oh, yeah. Entertainment's like, I need more room for the actors. Food and beverage, they're going, where's that cart I want to put out front? Merchandise, I don't have room for the backstage stuff. How am I going to get all my stuff in there? Who's that? Public relations. You never know what they're going to do. You don't even try. Do we have any PR people in the audience? I'm sure I'll get a good write-up. I didn't mean anything I said. Marketing, oh, you know what they're gonna plan, but they have a lot of their own ideas. And then, of course, you got the legal guys, and they can throw everything for a tizzy. So, if you don't do it right, you don't work with these people, all of a sudden, the budget and the schedule can just vanish and disappear. Your opening day goes right out the window, and the whole thing can blow up in your face. So you've put all this work in, you've got all these creative ideas, you've got your team together. How can you make sure that what you start out with in that balance can maintain its momentum and keep moving forward? Well, in a word, it's partnership. You got to rise above your own egos and start working with those groups that came crashing down before. So we're just going to take a look at some of those people and see how maybe you can start to work with them a little bit. Now, marketing, they have their own creative process. But marketing people, oh, good, I'm safe. Oh, there's one, okay. No, but they have a way of doing things. They have an approach that they want to do. They have an attitude on what they're going to develop, what they're going to do, and they have their own way of thinking what the next big thing is going to be. So they have a wow factor. That's got to be something, wow, it's got to wow our audience. And they'll probably want to have a big name intellectual property that's part of it. And of course, whatever sells. So they might not always, their thinking might not always be aligned with what you want to do creatively. So you might want to do something that's more aligned with, more media-centric, a big thrill, a live aspect to it, and some aspect of intellectual property. The thing is you got to realize is that they will drive the intent for the guest to come see whatever it is that you're creating. And guess what? You know what? If the guests don't show, you got no show. So it's people you have to work with. And if you work with them together, and you're part of each other's process, then what the guests come to see is what's been put out there for them to experience.
A land shrouded in mystery, remarkable yet foreboding, untouched by the hands of time, ruled by a beast at once majestic and ferocious. But is he friend? Or is he foe?
Prepare to ride for your life. Skull Island, Reign of Kong, Universal Orlando Resort.
It's always a challenge with that because you want to kind of under-expect and over-deliver on things. It's always really hard because if they're putting a message out there and the guests come to see it and it's not as cool and as big as what they say, now you got a guest expectation problem. So now we've got it open and we have our ever wonderful, lovely, and cooperative operations folks. I always have to check each group, any operators in the group. Okay. This is probably the group you have to balance and work with in a partnership more than anybody else. Because when things are out there and they're working fine, guests are flowing through a queue, they're enjoying themselves, having a great experience, everything works fine for the operators, right? Except when you have a day like June 18th, 2010 at Universal's Islands of Adventure, and that's the day we opened Wizarding World of Harry Potter. And we had 10,000 people lined up outside the gate, circulating through the lake area, across City Walk, and back out to the hub of the garage, waiting to get into this. Well, at that point, the operators were like, 10-4, I got it, and I'm out of here. Because that's not something you want to deal with if you're an operator. So you have to understand and you have to appreciate what these people go through to make sure what you're doing is going to work. So if we start looking at operations, a lot of people will look at it as creator versus client. And they really are your client. The operators generate the cash that's going to pay for everything you do. So if you have an attitude that's like, hey, we're the creative guys, we're going to tell you what to do, and this is how it's going to work. If it doesn't work, you know what? They're going to change it. So you have to have more of an attitude that's creator and client. That's the way it's going to work best. Building a relationship is really the key to success. If you work with somebody on a daily basis from the beginning of the project, and they understand the creative intent, but you understand why they have to have a certain cue looking a certain way, or a wall in a certain place, or lighting or safety or whatever, then you're going to understand it, you're going to build it into your process and your program to begin with. They've got a lot to balance. In our resort on itself, we've got Universal Studios, and we've got Islands of Adventure. And within those two parks, there are scores and scores of attractions and things for guests to do, and tens of thousands of guests coming every single day. Now, we sit in our little creative boxes and we come up with these really cool ideas, but these are the guys that have to deal with these thousands of people, and if there's an unhappy guest, they have to deal with it. And it reflects upon your attraction, no matter how you do it. So you work together to keep the creative content closely aligned with the operational requirements and vice versa. And it's really a give and take process. It builds trust. If the operator's coming to you and they want to change something while you're working on the plan, and you say, no, it's going to ruin the story, it's going to ruin the intent. And then they open it, and what they were concerned about is still a problem, they're going to change it. They will change it every single time, and no matter what kind of relationship you have with them, if it doesn't work for the park, if it doesn't work for the guests, doesn't create a better guest experience, they will change it. So why not work with them right at the outset and say, you know what, you're right, let's do it this way, let's turn the wall this way, let's add a few more feet to the queue, because if they don't get the number of people, if the capacity's not working, whatever it is, they'll change your show. So it's really more of a selfish attitude than being, you know, a good, nice guy. It's you want your show to look and feel to the guests the way you planned it to be when it opens and after that. So if you work with the operators at the beginning to make sure it meets their requirements, remember they're the client, then you're going to have a better attraction for the guests. And when it all works, the show opens as designed, and ops can run things safely, key, efficiently, and at capacity. Again, I mentioned capacity is a huge issue for the operators. And the best thing is the show continues to run as designed. And when you get that, you really get a win-win-win for you, the operators, and most importantly, your guests, because then everybody is happy with it. So, the next group of people, whether they're maintaining an existing coaster like Rip Ride Rocket, or they're launching a new one like the new Hulk coaster, or they're helping to validate Volcano Bay, which is something that's not even open yet, but they have to make sure, looking at it technologically, that it's going to work for them. It's the technical services guys. I like to say they're the front line for fun when the creative is done. Because concepts are great, and new vehicle designs are really cool and amazing, but keeping them running is even better. And if you can't keep it running, again, it's not going to be a great guest experience, and that's what we're all after all the time. So in technical services, you want to have direct input during concept and design to provide invaluable insight to how your creative ideas can be molded into real-world functionality. It's just another way of saying, if it doesn't work when you design it, if it doesn't work after you design it and you put it in the field, it's not a good guest experience. And if the tech services guys can't keep it running, then it's going to be an even worse experience. So open communication right from the outset. Just bring them in to the phase, to the beginning of the discussion. Let them know kind of technical equipment you're planning to use. They can give you feedback. And understand each other's points of view. If you're bringing in a whole different projection system that's different from everything else in the park that they're using, now you've thrown a monkey wrench into the works. That's not to say you don't want to introduce a new technology, but work with the tech services guys so that they understand when you're putting in this new technology, take them to the manufacturer. Let them meet the manufacturer. Let them go to the vendors. It doesn't matter. Make them part of the process so that they feel that they're part of the equation and they're a partner in the operation. And make sure they're intimately involved in all stages. Because when you turn an attraction over and tech service takes it over, you know what? You're now the outsider. You have to get their permission to cross your track that you've been working on for 2 years because the vehicles are now running. So you better have a good relationship with these guys because you know what? They can kill you. They can cut you out of the process that they're now in because their main focus is to get this thing up and running efficiently every day and every hour. So you have to build that relationship with them so you can get out and get to what you need to do from a show standpoint. And you get them involved early, you can give tech services the opportunity to study how they're going to maintain things prior to the installation. That goes back to working with the vendors and letting them see how you're going to put things together. And they can also help you figure it out. It's not just a case of saying, here's what we're going to do, you guys figure out how to run it. They could have suggestions that say, hey guys, here's something else we've been working on, or something that works best for us. Do you think you can make it work in your attraction? So well-designed, well-built, and maintainable attraction that will operate safely, reliably, and efficiently for you and your guests. The ultimate goal. So one of my favorite all-time effects that done in any park anywhere was at Poseidon's Fury, and it's called the Highwater Vortex Tunnel. And has anybody been through that? Yeah, it's great. It's amazing. The first time I went through it, I'm in awe every time I go through it. But this is an old video that shows 20 years ago how they were trying to talk about it and explain it.
There's a whole lot of water, and it's forced out of a manifold with 40 nozzles in it, and the water forms all the way around the inside of this tube.
We're standing near the vortex manifold to where the pipes from each of the vortex pumps comes in. These nozzles up here are the nozzles that exhaust the water at a high speed and forces it around the inside of the tube. When the water does come out of the nozzles, it does come out at very high speed, between 90 and 100 miles an hour.
So that's something that the tech guys have kept running all these years, and they've done a great job. And the only problem I understand, I wasn't there, but I think Steve Blum can actually speak to it, is when the test is going on and the water doesn't reach the other side and you're in the middle of the tunnel, you get wet. But it's a great effect, and they've done a great job putting it together, keeping it running for us. So merchandise, another group you have to work with, and there's really no limit to what can be put on t-shirts, as you can see. But, you know, merchandise locations in stores and retail locations have become such a vital part of all the theming that we do in the parks and part of any attraction. It's kind of become that you have a store, and then the pre-show to the store is this attraction that you go through. But then you get to the retail aspect of it. But the good thing is that sales projections for retail, if it's a really good idea, can actually help your initial investment. So if you can sell the idea to the merchants that this is going to generate money for you, then you can get a little more money to make it happen. So that's something to keep in mind. So when you have something and it works, and it turns out in reality the way you drew it up, and you have guests coming, now you have a success. So the next time you go to do your next retail location, you have an opportunity to do something even more with it. Now what they sell may not always go along with your storyline. If you're selling a cute unicorn at Super Silly Stuff Store outside of Despicable Me Minion Mayhem, it works. It's part of the story, and it plays well. And he's so fluffy. But when all of a sudden the unicorn appears in a merchandise kiosk opposite Dudley Do-Right's Ripsaw Falls in another park, then you kind of go, eh? So partnership is important. It gets you so far. But if you work with them closely, it'll still work out okay. You also find out how you're going to do vacation information while you're in the middle of Jurassic Park. So it's another one to figure out. But space allocation for the displays and everything is really important for on stage and backstage, because that obviously if the merchants are going to sell things, they have to have a place to store everything. So if you don't provide the storage for it or the right layout, then they're going to find their own layout. And all of a sudden, you're going to find some of your theming part of a store getting pushed aside because they have to either put more merchandise out on the floor or they have to find a place to store it. And things can get pretty tight if you don't do it right. And again, the store, any retail, like the food part, is all part of your show. So you want to make sure it looks good for the guest. It has to work for the merchants. And a great design, beautiful fixtures can look great. But if there's an ECV going through the store or guests are bumping into the edges of display units and they're tearing apart, that's going to be a problem. Because they'll replace it with something that may not even match which the original design intent was. So something as common as building something that's going to last, which sounds rudimentary, but it's so important because if it doesn't last, they'll replace it with something that does. And again, it might not necessarily fit into your design theme. And they also get a lot of guest abuse at certain times. So if you do smart design and with a better build, you can get amazing retail performance. Again, it's a magic sound when you come to do your next project. Food and beverage. And these guys are creative too. This is actually executive chef Steve Jason at Universal Orlando, and he and his team are about the most creative people you could run into. When they had to come up with ideas for the Simpsons expansion, the food was really the whole show for that project. And they had to come up with the Krusty Burger and the Flaming Moe, and they had to create a show out of the food. And the same thing with everything they did for the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and Diagon Alley. And the dining experience, you can use it to enhance the adventure, right? I mean, it's all there's gonna be food, there's gonna be a restaurant, there's gonna be kiosks or whatever, so use it to your advantage to make it part of the show. And again, partnering with them at the beginning is gonna be a key factor. And it ain't all gourmet, but it's part of the story, and it depends on where you're gonna dine. Speaking of Krusty. So, again, communication is the key. Food and beverage needs to understand the overall vision. So if they know the story that you're trying to tell going in, again, going back to The Simpsons, and it's all about the food, and it's all about the animation, the characters, and the fun, they can design it that way. Creative needs to grasp the operational requirements. Simple thing like full service versus a quick service restaurant. If you don't know, ask. That's the key. Bring your partner in, and if they're talking about something you're not sure what it is, just ask. They'll do the same to you. Believe me, they'll always ask you, what are you going to do about this, or what are you going to do about that? Ask them what it's about. So if it's a full service restaurant versus a quick service, little things like serving stations and host areas and a bar and a beer keg cooler and more prep space for a full service versus a quick service where you just have pickup stations and maybe an ice bin and maybe there's a cooler below a cabinet. And they have a faster turnaround, so they have to be able to get folks in and out of the area faster. So you have to keep it clear. You have to make sure that there's a clearance around the back of the kiosk or whatever for them to get their coolers around to reload what they have out there. So there's a lot of little things that they have to deal with on a daily basis that you have to consider when you're planning and designing things. Flexibility, because things change. Health codes, equipment, new technology, and new leadership. If you start a project, because our projects often take, 2 years or more at times, you start a project, the end of the project, when you're starting to roll things out for the food and beverage, there's different leadership in place. So they have different ideas, different ways they want to do it. And menus, oh my gosh. Menus, it sounds like such a silly thing, but if you think of the theming of an area, and now menus all really need to be on video monitors, right? Because they change them. They'll change them up to the day you open. They'll change menus and price items and things. But you have to figure out how you're going to work that video monitor into the design of a period piece, right? Normally you just have something written out on a chalkboard or whatever, it fits in your story, but now you have to put a video monitor in there and you have to make sure it looks good and it fits the environment. You got to work with them because you need to know how much copy they're going to put on, how big the screen needs to be, how far away the guests are going to stand so they can see it, yada, yada, yada. But it's a lot of little things added together that make a huge difference for you and for them. So results-oriented. You have a richly themed environment that are safe for team members and guests, operationally efficient, and drive incremental revenue with return visitation. That's directly from the food and beverage people. That's the way I would put it. But it was really true. I mean, it all drives back to repeat visitation and revenue driving. That's what their job is. So what they're doing all makes sense. What our job is to make sure it all looks good. And if you work together, you can accomplish that with them. Next up is our friends at entertainment. At Skull Island Reign of Kong, for the first time, we just put in live actors into the queue line. And it worked so well with Halloween Horror Nights with the live actors that we thought it would be a really cool element to have. But we had to consider things like green room space and wardrobe space and restrooms and onstage access, because how do you get the actor from backstage cut through the queue and into their position without the guests seeing them and giving away what the bid is going to be? And you have special lighting, special audio needs. It's like a whole separate package. But the problem is, if any one of those things start to disappear, it's a slow erosion, and it starts to go away, and eventually you have a space in your show, in your queue, where there's no more entertainment. And now you got to come up with something to fill that space. Yeah, good luck with that. So, again, the entertainment guys, somebody have a partnership with. They have a different set of needs, different set of requirements, but you want to make sure that you fulfill those, because if you lose, especially something like this, if they take the live actors out of this show at Skull Island Reign of Kong, I've got a big open gap where I can't do anything with from a show standpoint, and I got to reimagine what's going to happen. So, public relations, one of my favorite groups. They're the ones that come up with the extravaganza Ramapalooza opening. So they always have the big event at the beginning, except maybe if it's a bunch of kids holding beer mugs. But that's something we don't talk about. It's butterbeer, believe me. But they need to know what you're going to do before you do it so they can tell you how to talk about it before you can even say it. And that's a little confusing, but it's so true. Because they're the ones that are going to first start putting the message out for whatever it is that you're going to do. So show them what's going to happen, what it's going to look like, so they can start imagining how they're going to start talking about it. Work with them on the messaging to make sure it matches your content. They'll have a certain order of things that they want to reveal about your attraction, and they'll have their own reasons for doing it. Sometimes it's a little tough because you know so much more about it, you want to talk about it all the time, but they're like, no, we can't talk about that because we have to make that part of the release for 6 months from now. So again, they have their own method for doing things. Sometimes it's a little confusing, and sometimes it can be very aggravating, and sometimes it can delay things. And interviews and media events during installation can drive you crazy, and they can delay your project. Well, they will delay your project.
Humans don't deserve to live.
Well, I wouldn't take it that far, but it can be aggravating. So, you have to talk about your project, but you can't say anything on some of these first media interviews. And that's what I call it public restrictions. Because they get to be frustrating. Again, you know so much, you're getting so excited about it, you want to go out and tell everybody about it, but you can't because they have their certain way of doing things. So if you work together closely, you can start out with a bang and still have things make sense when it all opens. Except for Halloween Horror Nights, which I can't make any sense of no matter what. But it can start out with a great show at the beginning. It gets guests excited. They're the ones that kind of launch everything. So that gets the feeling, and they do a great job with it, really.
Attention. This is a safety advisory for all departing expedition riders.
Oh, no.
Due to difficult driving conditions across the entire island, riders should expect sudden and extreme movement. If you are an expectant mother, or if you have heart, back, or neck conditions, abnormal blood pressure, recovering from recent surgery, or any other condition that may be aggravated by intense movement, or if you are prone to motion sickness or dizziness, you are hereby advised not to participate in this particular expedition. Finally, the use of still or motion cameras is strictly prohibited.
Well, you can see there's a lot of issues that come to play when safety comes up, and it's always the very first thing we always have to consider. So if you look at the environmental health and safety issues that you have to deal with, and these are so important, but sometimes people don't think about those right up front. It can really affect your attraction. So these guys, you have overhead safety. So you're coming in an attraction, you've hung this really cool set piece up here. And the HS guy comes in and goes, do you have 18 cables on that? No, I got a screw going through the roof. Is that okay? No. So now all of a sudden you have to add things that are now visual intrusions. Ride envelope. Okay, it's cool, we got this ride going on the track. You know what, we can have the sets like right here and the guy's gonna come in and things are gonna happen. Well, no, you can't because you have a ride envelope that goes a lot farther out. So you better understand when you're doing your track layout exactly what the ride envelope is and how close you can bring things to interact with a guest. Because something you think is gonna interact with guests at like 3 feet away has a whole different feeling and look and attitude to it if it's 20 feet away. Emergency egress. Again, you got your track laid out. What happens if the ride vehicle breaks down? How do you get guests out? Where are they gonna go? How much room do you need to get them out? It's all stuff that has to be included in your plan. ADA compliances, myriad of those. You have to make sure you match all those because there's legal implications to that. Elevation changes. Little change in the grade. Not only for ADA, but for guests. Make sure that ramp is a proper code. And you have that break in the ramp where you need it. Otherwise, you're gonna chop up concrete and you're gonna do it all over again. So some things you gotta look at. You got fall protection. One of the things happened recently in Kong was I went out to see the show And in one of the scenes, there's this big, bright, shiny bar going right across the back of one scene. Looked really cool, but it had nothing to do with the show. But that was a tie-off point that we missed for the safety guys, because they had to be able to tie off on something to get down over the rock work to do their work. We missed that. So we had to go back and figure out how we're going to build that into the set and make it disappear from the guest view. Audio spills. Obviously, you have to have announcements all over the place. And there's always a trick. Do you theme them? How much can you theme them versus making it a show? Because you don't want to make it seem like such a part of the show, the guests really don't pay that much attention to it. But it has to be very succinct, very clear, so the guests understand the safety precautions. Graphics. Graphics are always going to be there. There's a lot of letters, a lot of words that have to go up. And you have to get them in a certain sign. You have to have so many signs associated with it. You better know where they're going to go. You better know how often they're going to have to be viewed and how you're going to theme them. Security cameras. If you design your set and design your show set drawings, and you go to the field, you come out and things are built, and all of a sudden, there's a security camera right in the middle of the head of one of your statues on your set. Because somebody forgot to look and see where the security cameras had to go, and all of a sudden now you have to change it. You have to reroute the cameras, you have to change your design, you have to change your layout to accommodate those. So little things like that, you have to make sure you know where they're going to go. Alarms, obviously. You have to make sure those are in your set. Emergency lighting, where is that going to be? How's it going to be seen by the guests when it's not on? Fire extinguishers, and the always pleasant exit signs. Anybody ever have an issue putting exit signs on a dark ride? It can be pretty annoying, but they have to be there. So you have to make sure they're part of your package. You have to work with the guys to understand how many you're going to need, where they have to go, and you can work back and forth to see how you can mitigate any of the problems. Legal, my favorite group. Any lawyers in the house? Oh, I'm really safe now. So they're involved with anything including content, money, and time. You know the old adage, you can have it good, you can have it cheap, you can have it now, pick two. Well, that's a legal guys come in. But you have to make sure they're involved in all aspects of it. So you have your schedule, and you have your nice little package put together, and everything seems to be okay. Maybe a few things you kind of skimped on, you weren't really sure with legal, but don't worry about that. They'll catch it later. All of a sudden, things get a little shaky, and part of your content question, boom, stop, go back to start. You got to do everything all over again, right? So how do you balance the legal guys? First of all, don't assume need. Unless you're a lawyer or paralegal, don't assume that you don't or do need to include legal in a discussion. That little video of Katy Perry that you kind of slipped into your pre-show, you find out later you can't use it because you didn't get it cleared, so now you have to put like Aunt Clara taking your teeth out at Thanksgiving as part of your pre-show because that's the only video you have. Allow time for the process. Don't call up the guys in the legal group and say, hey, listen, we open in 2 weeks, can you clear the name? Because that ain't gonna happen. Make sure you understand, talk to the lawyers, understand how long it's gonna take for them to clear things. Because they can have an effect on your content immediately. Keep the legal beagles close. They are your friends. They have the same goal you do. They wanna get your attraction open. They wanna make sure that all the safety regulations are being met, that everything's clear, that there's no copyright infringements, and they can protect the property that you have created from somebody else infringing on it. So keep them close by. And be clear about your requests and intent of usage. Let them know that, well, are we gonna use it, the name with a colon, or can we use the second half of the name only? Can we use capital letters? Can we put a hyphen in here on this word for a name? You'd be amazed at how many little things like that can affect what you're doing because you're not clear to the lawyers about exactly how you want to use something that's so important. So, in the end, you want to take control, right? You're the creative guys. You're out there going to tell everybody what to do, and you're going to take control. Actually, I think it's more about finding the balance. So you want to listen to what people have to say. Don't just hear them in a meeting, listen to what they're talking about. Absorb the information. Don't just let it bounce off. Just take some time afterwards to kind of absorb what you heard and filter through it. Filter through the information that you've heard in the meetings with your partners or whatever and kind of start to formulate things. Formulate a plan based on the information you have because that's all you can do right now. You have a gut instinct that you'll put as part of that, but to make things work and to balance things out, you need to kind of formulate a plan based on what you know. Discuss the plan with the appropriate people. right? Get your partners together, say, okay, based on what we've talked about, guys, here's how we're gonna move forward. Anybody have any questions? Then you get the direct feedback from people. Then you get to say yes or no on this, and because down the road, if somebody says, hey, I never agreed to that, you say, yeah, we did, we talked about this, guys. Now, it works most of the time. Sometimes there's always going to be things that come up that are gonna change it, but at least you make an effort out front. Then you implement the plan. Make a decision, make it work, move forward. And then you decide what the next step's gonna be and what has to be taken next. Now, originally this would say finding the lafted, but that didn't make any sense at all. So the colors just had nothing to do with it, just to make it stand out a little bit. So this is what SATE can mean. If you're not careful, you don't find the balance for things, but then we can go back to what it really is. Okay, story, architecture, technology, and experience, and I return it to the rest of my colleagues. Thank you very much.